Hello everyone, welcome to today's class. On today's class, I'm going to be teaching you how to draft your basic corset pattern. I've gone ahead to draft a basic bodice. What's remaining is to add my measurements here. So for people that might not be conversant with this, I'm going to explain it. Here I took my shoulder measurement. Half of my shoulder measurement is 7.5. Then my round sleeve, half of my round sleeve is 8 inches. So I went ahead to mark it, and then I used my French curve to draw this armhole. Then I took 1 inch for my shoulder slope. Then I measured my neck 3 inches by 3 inches. That's like a standard for me. Then I also placed my other measurements. My shoulder to nipple is 10 inches. My shoulder to underbust is 13.5, and my half length is 17 inches for the front. Then my full length for the top that I'm making is 25 inches. But if you're making a gown, you can just stop at this, your half length measurements, when cutting your pattern. So I'm going to input my other measurements, which is my nipple to nipple. My nipple to nipple measurement is 7 inches, into 2 is 3.5. Then I'll add half inches, which is 4 inches. If your nipple to nipple is 4, after dividing into 2 is 4, add half inches. Whatever you get when you divide your nipple to nipple measurement, add half inches to it. Then you place it on your pattern. So on my under bust, I'll mark the 4 inches. On my bust point, which is my shoulder to nipple, I'll mark the 4 inches. I'll mark the 4 inches straight down to my full length. Like I said, if you're stopping at your half length, let's say you are adding a skirt or a trouser to make a jumpsuit or a gown, you stop at your half length. I'll take this nipple to nipple point to my arm side, which is my round arm. So I'll mark it here, so I'll mark the 4 inches upwards too. Then I'm going to be imputing my darts. I'll take half inches in and out. That's like a standard dart measurement. If you're taking darts for a top, your standard dart measurement is 1/2 inches on both sides. So I'll take 1/2 inches here. Then on my bust point, I'll go down by 1 inch. Then I'll slant from here to meet this other leg of the dart. Then I'll take from here to this other side too. Then after that, I'll take my tape and measure my under bust, my bust point to my under bust. My bust point to my under bust is 3.5. So this measurement I take here, I'm going to take it all round, which is where my corset cup is going to be centered on. So I'm going to be marking 3.5 inches all round. So whatever your nipple points to your underbust give you, if it is 3 inches, you take 3 inches all round. If it is 4 inches, you take 4 inches all round. It does not mean because I'm taking 3.5, so it's 3.5 that is the standard. That's not it. So I'm going to connect all the lines together. So then I'll take this my nipple point measurements here, and I'll take it up here because I'm going to be taking my darts here, so I will not make a mistake. That's why I'm taking it up. So at this point here, I'll take 1/2 inches here on this outer part, on the middle part of the corset. I'll take 1/2 inches here, and then on the inside I'll take 1/2 and 1/4. 1/2 inches here, 1/2 and 1/4 inches here. Then on the upper part of the bust point, I'll also go up by 1 inches, like the way I did at the down part. I went down by 1 inches. I'll also go up by 1 inches. You might ask, why am I going up by 1 inches? For those that have done breast tube or that know how to cut breast tube, you understand. I'm going up by 1 inches because if I draw this 1/2 and 1/4 inches to meet this actual bust points, it's going to be very sharp on the nipple point area. So that's why I'm going to draw it to meet this 1 inch is 1 inch upward. Then I'll use my French curve to blend it together. So I'm going to draw it. You are not going to slant it, just give it a little curve. If you have your French curve, that's why I said French curve is important, but it doesn't mean that if you don't have your French curve, you can't do it. You can use your hand to achieve it as well. So curve to meet this line. So this is done. Then on this bottom area, I'm going to be taking 1 inch. On this middle 4 inches here, you're not going to take it from this other leg of the dart, no. You're going to take it from the middle inch here, from this middle line here you drew. You take 1 inches inside, and then you take 1 inches outside. 1 inches on both sides of the cup. So I'll use my curve driller to curve it to meet this 1 inches under our actual nipple points. Then you blend them together. Make sure that it doesn't have a sharp edge showing. So you blend them together. But for people that don't have a French curve, you can also use your hand to blend it. You can use your hand to blend it very well. You don't necessarily need to have a French curve. It doesn't mean that if you don't have a French curve, you cannot sew a corset. This 1 inch I took here, I'm going to draw it down to my full length. After doing that, I'll place my neck depth. So the neck depth is where I want the middle part of my corset to be, how open I want it to be. So that's why you need to measure your clients very well when you want to sew a corset for them. So my neck depth measurement is 9.5. I'm going to go by 9 inch. I'll make it 9 inch because I don't want it to be too open to open my bust. I'm going to make it 9 inches. 9 inches. So I'll draw the line to meet this circle here. So I've made it 9 inches here. So on this part, I'll measure 1/2 and 1/4 inches. If you see a corset at the middle, there is one straight stuff at the middle, that's where you join your cup to. So that's the middle. that you mark 1/2 and 1/4. This is on fold. When you open it, it will be 1.5. Then you sew with 1/2 inches, then it's going to be 1. So you should not go beyond this 1/2 and 1/4 inches. Even if you are busty or you have small breasts, don't go beyond this 1/2 and 1/4 inches. If not, your corset is not going to stand well. It's not going to come together very well. It's going to be wide. So you mark 1/2 and 1/4 inches. Then you take it down to meet your bust point. But if you are marking it at this your bust point area, if you feel or you want your breast to show, and then you mark your actual nipple point, that you want the neck to be at your nipple point, then you mark 10 inches here. Then you just make a curve to meet me. I'm not marking my own at this my nipple point. So since I'm not marking my own at my nipple point, I will draw a straight line to meet my nipple point. Then after doing that, I'll make a curve from this place to my under bust here, to this first dark leg of my under bust. So I'm going to make the curve to meet it. It doesn't have to be circle. That's why I said this circle is just for you to know where your corset cup is going to be centered on. So you're not actually, your corset is not actually this circle. Then I'm going to be imputing my measurements. My bust measurement is 37.5 into 4. It will give me 9.3 or 9.4 rather. So I'll mark 9.4 here. Then on my half length, I'll impute my measurement for my half length, which is my waist. My waist is 31 inches is my actual waist, but because I'm going to be snatching my waist, I'm going to make it 29 inches. So when you're measuring your client, or if you want to measure yourself, if you're saying for yourself, you measure your actual waist measurement and how you want it to be snatched. So when you put your tape on your waist, if you want it to be 2 inches smaller, you make sure you're 2 inches smaller to see if you can breathe on it. Yes. So I measured my waist. My actual waist is 31, but I want to slant it with 2 inches. So I measured my 29 inches on my waist, and I can breathe with it. So I'll impute that on the pattern. So my waist is 29 inches divided by 4 is 7.2. So I'll mark that 7.2 here. Then on this full length line, I'm going to be putting my round waist that I've already measured. My round waist is 36. 36 into 4 is 9 inches. So I'll put that here. Then I'll take that measurement, because I removed 2 inches now from the actual waist measurements. So I'm going to be putting it back. So 2 inches here, and then 2 inches here. Then I'll connect the lines together. So I'm going to take my darts here. I'm sorry guys, I didn't know my camera stopped recording, but I've done some other things and I'll just explain them so you'll not be lost. So after drafting the pattern, I took my bust dart here, 1.5 inch, then I slanted it to my nipple point. Then I did my neckline curve here. So I measured 9 inches for the deepness of my neckline at the front. Then I measured 7.5 inch for my cleavage neckline, how I want it to, because I want here to be sweetheart and not to be straight. So here I made it 7.5, then here I made it 9 inches because I wanted to show my cleavage a little bit. So if you want to sew a corset without yoke, a corset that is sleeveless, then there is no need for you to take it to this armhole. You can just curve it like the way I did here. You can curve it here to meet with your neckline, then you curve it to your middle neckline. So you curve it here to meet with your darts here, then curve it to your neckline. Also, if you want to still add yoke and you don't want your yoke to be added to your fabric, you want your yoke to be separate, you can cut it like this, then use here as your yoke. But I want my yoke and my pattern to align together. I want them to share together, so I want my sleeve to join with the fabric. I don't want to sew my sleeve on its own. I hope you get that. So that's why I took this curve from the armhole, then curved it to my 7.5 to meet the deepness of my neckline, which is 9 inch. I'll take 1 inch here. This 1 inch I'm taking here is so that my boobs will be fitted inside of the cup very well. So after taking 1 inch here, I'll curve from here to meet the 1 inch. Then I'll take this 1 inch up in a straight line. You can also decide to slant it whichever way you want to. But I'll just take it in a straight line. Then I'll go ahead to cut my pattern. So I'm done with my pattern now. What I have to do now is to cut. So these are the places you have to cut out. You have to cut out this darts. You don't need it anymore since you've already placed it back. Also have to cut these breast darts. I'll show you what to do. Then you cut this out, then you cut your yoke out of it. If you are putting a yoke, you keep this pattern and put on the fabric you want to use as your yoke. But if you're not putting a yoke, then you don't need this upper part anymore. So I'm going to cut. I've gone ahead to label my pattern. Here I named it cup A, here cup B, then I did arrow here so as to know the two plates that are meeting together when I'm sewing, so I will not make a mistake. So I'm going to cut now. At this point I went up by 1.5 inches and I curved it a little bit because I don't want my top to just be straight. I want it to have a little curve to rest on top of my hips. I've cut out the excess part of camera, so I'm going to show you how to cut your corset now. So cut out the yoke first. So then this is how your corset is going to look like. Then I'll cut this cup out because this is your corset cup and this other side is the bodice. So before I cut out the cup, I'm going to add a piece of the pattern paper here, because after cutting out these dots like this, most of the times the allowance here will now shift. So it's better to be safe than sorry. It will not have to affect my sewing allowance. And I'll come here. Then I'm just going to extend the line. So after doing this, I will pleat. You can either trim it off or you just do it like this, pleat it like this. Make sure that this place is not pleated as well. So you see, this allowance is now a little bit shorter. Then you blend this other one. So this is the 1 inch we took before. So blend it, because if you look at it now, this one is at this side, this one is at this side. So if we cut it like this, it's going to affect our cup. So you now blend it first. Before you cut it, you blend it. You can put a paper tip to gum it to keep it together. So I'm putting a harrow here so that when I'm sewing, I would know that this and these two goes together. This is the front of our corset pattern. So we're done with the front. Now let's move to the back. Just as the front measurement, just as you do for the front. Although the back you had your zipper allowance, I added 1 inch for my zipper allowance. Took my shoulder measurement, slanted it with 1 inch, 3 inches for my neck, 1.5 inches for the deepness of the neck. Curved my armhole 8 inches here. Then I've imputed my bust, my waist, and my top length measurements. So for the back pattern, you know at the front we removed 1.5 inches at the bust area. So for the back pattern, we're also removing 1.5 inches, which is your half length back measurement. Your full length back measurement, you remove 1.5 inches. Then to take your dart measurements, you divide your waist into 2. My waist into 2 is 3.5. So I mark 3.5 from my arm side to my full length. So after marking this, I'm going to impute the dart measurements, which is 1/2 inches on both sides, which is the standard back measurements. So I'm going to slant it here. After that, I'll put my 1 inch back for the darts here. I'm going to add my 2 inches sewing allowance. If you want to put more boning channel, so this is like a boning channel for the back. If you want to put more boning channel, you can decide to cut it straight, just like that, or you can just put your bias, sew a bias and run and put a plastic bone through it. But I'm going to leave my own like this because I'm going to sew a bias on top and put my plastic bone on it. So I want to make my shoulder back to be slanted. I want it to be a little bit slanted, so I'm going to make it 9 inches. Then just like the front, the way we did the front, that the yoke will be half side will be the yoke then. So I'm going to take my shoulder back. I'm going to slant my back a little bit. I'm going to make it 9 inches. So just as the front, I'm going to slant it like this. So this is my back pattern. Then this is my yoke. If I want to do a yoke, this is how I want my yoke to be. Back yoke. Then I want to make my bag to have a loophole. So guys, I don't know what happened, my video just cut again while drafting the back pattern, but I stopped at making a loop over the back, so I'm not going to add the zip allowance to it. I'm going to remove the zip allowance. We don't need it, or I don't need it, because I don't want my back of my corset to have a zip. I want to do it lacing back. So after removing the zip allowance, I'll go ahead to measure how open I want the back to be. So I want it to be slanted a little bit, so I'm going to make here 1 inch. Then I'll make here 1/2 and 1/4 inch. I'm going to slant it to meet with my 1 inch. So when cutting now, I'll cut this off. So this is where my loophole is going to be. You can use eyelets for the loophole, or you use bias and you pass your rope through it. So this is all for the back pattern, so I'm going to cut it off. So you cut this dart off, you cut this loophole off, then you cut your yoke off if you're not using the yoke, but if you're using it, cut it and keep it aside. Here, just as the front, I went up by 1.5 inch to curve it, because I don't want my top to just be straight. I want it to be a little bit curved to rest on my hip. So just like the front, I'm going to label this side to side back, middle back. I'm going to have to label this on back yoke, so I'm going to cut now. So make sure to put your arrow to know the difference between the up and the bottom and the place that you're sewing together. So I went ahead to cut my material, cut my pattern on my material, and added 1/2 inches on all round. Like the cup, I added 1/2 inches around the back, 2 back, and this is 2 fronts. Then after cutting, I made a notch. For example, now this is the back, this is the 2 back. I made a notch on this side because I'm sewing here to this side, so I made a notch so that when I'm sewing I will not make a mistake, be able to see that okay, these two belong together. I make a notch on the front, on the upper part, to know the difference between the up and the bottom. Then you do this for your material, for your lining, and also for your pad as well.